Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Our top story. In Munich, the U.S. and China presented sharply contrasting visions for global security, including their approach to Europe and the Taiwan Strait. It comes as President Trump plans for a high-stakes visit to China in early April, where he's expected to meet with Chinese leader Xi Jinping. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio says Europe and the United States can build a new Western century against adversaries like China. A retired Lieutenant Colonel comments on that. Two Chinese-American Winter Olympians, Eileen Gu and Alysa Liu, sparking discussions about money and principles. Enes Kanter Freedom speaks out.
The Chinese government understands the power of the symbolism. It uses celebrities, sports, and global events to project an image of legitimacy and strength.
And a new study reveals that over 2,000 groups linked to the Chinese Communist Party are operating in the U.S., Canada, the U.K., and Germany. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Chinese Foreign Minister Wang delivered back-to-back speeches Saturday at the Munich Security Conference. Their remarks highlighted sharply different visions for the future of global security. Rubio emphasized what he called the shared roots of the United States and Europe, saying America is a child of Europe. He also stressed that the Western alliance must defend its civilization and undertake reforms to fulfill the goal. Meanwhile, Wang described China and Europe as partners rather than rivals. However, he avoided directly addressing concerns over Beijing's support for Russia's invasion of Ukraine. It's an issue that European leaders view as a direct threat to the continent's security and stability. Beyond Europe, Taiwan remains one of the central flashpoints in U.S.-China tensions.
Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi again promoted the One China principle, calling Taiwan an internal issue for Beijing. He also escalated tensions with Japan, accusing its stance on Taiwan of signaling militaristic revival. Last year, Japan's prime minister suggested Japan might intervene militarily if China attacked Taiwan. In response, Japan's foreign minister and chief cabinet secretary condemned Wang's comments, calling them factually incorrect and without basis. Meanwhile, Japan's ruling party scored an historic victory in last week's parliamentary elections, signaling strong support for its stance on regional security. Taiwan's foreign minister also fired back at Wang, accusing him of distorting international opinion and condemning China's military provocations as a threat to regional stability. According to intelligence reports, Xi Jinping has ordered China's military to be ready to take Taiwan by 2027, if necessary, while countering any U.S. military response.
When a dictator says he's preparing to do something dangerous, all of us must take him at his word. That reality makes 2026 an important year, one in which we must prepare at home and abroad for all scenarios, using all available tools of our national power. The goal is simple: to ensure Beijing never decides that aggression against Taiwan would be fast, cheap, or successful.
Although U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio didn't mention Taiwan directly, he noted that U.S.-China interests are deeply at odds. And over in Washington, President Trump has escalated arms sales to Taiwan. Meanwhile, Congress moves forward with new support legislation, including the Taiwan Protection Act, aimed at deterring Chinese military action through economic sanctions.
President Trump recently announced that he plans to visit China in early April. Addressing expectations for a potential summit, Rubio emphasized what he called the responsibility to manage and stabilize the relationship between the world's two largest economies.
Because we're two large countries with huge global interests, our national interests will often not align. Their national interests and ours will not align, and we owe it to the world to try to manage those as best we can, obviously avoiding conflict, both economic and worse. On areas in which our interests are aligned, I think we can work together to make positive impact on the world, and we seek opportunities to do that with them. But we have to have a relationship with China, and many of the countries represented here today are going to have a relationship with China, always understanding that nothing that we agree to could come at the expense of our national interest. And frankly, we expect China to act in their national interest, as we expect every nation state to act in their national interest. And the goal of diplomacy is to try to navigate those times in which our national interests come into conflict with one another, always hoping to do it peacefully.
Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi's remarks underscore the high stakes surrounding Taiwan and the broader direction of U.S.-China ties. Wang said if the U.S. chooses to move toward China, the two countries can move toward cooperation. But he warned that if Washington pushes to decouple from Beijing or crosses China's so-called red lines on Taiwan, the relationship would slide into confrontation. Despite their sharply different visions, observers see the ministers' follow-up meeting as laying the groundwork for a possible April summit between Trump and Xi. To discuss a united West against its adversaries like China, we spoke with retired Lieutenant Colonel Darin Gaub. He's a geopolitical strategist, retired Black Hawk helicopter pilot, former battalion commander, and author of Veritas Vincit. In Munich, Rubio highlighted that America and Europe are part of one civilization, Western civilization, and that united, we can build a new Western century, drawing a contrast with communism there. What does a united Western civilization mean for adversaries like communist China?
Well, first of all, what it would mean to China is that they're losing their grip on some of the things they've invested in over the years. They're specifically targeting Western nations in Europe and elsewhere to try to peel them away from us and create different coalitions of nations and peoples that would, turn and make an enemy out of the United States, or at least a competitor out of the United States in a negative way. You've already seen some of that happen anyways, not necessarily purely with Western European nations turning away somewhat, but the effect of what's going on in Venezuela, what's already happened with the elections in Argentina, and they're watching very closely what could happen with elections in places like Brazil. So if this keeps going down the road where Western nations draw closer to each other and crawl further away from communist influence, regardless of its source, then the strength of China will continue to wane, as it has been for a while, just because of their economy failing the way it is right now.
Next, an update from the Winter Olympics in Milan. Two young athletes, both of American Chinese heritage, are in the spotlight. That's because they've taken different paths and hold differing opinions on China. Figure skater Alysa Liu, representing Team USA, won a gold medal for the U.S. team last week. Her father told NTD that he took about 20 family members to Milan over the weekend for her upcoming games later this week. The other one is Eileen Gu, the U.S. skier who's won a silver medal for China last week.
Eileen Gu won another silver on Monday. Both athletes were born and raised in California, but one of them chose not to compete for her homeland, the United States, and went with China instead. Eileen Gu has brought 5 Olympic medals under Communist China's flag, including 2 gold medals when she competed in Beijing. Gu made $23 million last year alone after being showered with Chinese endorsement deals. Her mother is a Chinese immigrant. Sports isn't Gu's only specialty. She's also majored in international relations at Stanford University. When Time magazine asked her about Beijing's suppression of the Uyghur ethnic group, Gu said it's not her business. Gold medalist Alysa Liu also competed in the Winter Olympics in Beijing. The U.S. State Department took special precautions during her stay there, assigning security guards to her 24 hours a day. Why? Because the 16-year-old was targeted by Chinese spies while she was preparing for the games. They were after her father, Arthur Liu. Liu was a student activist who escaped China during the 1989 Tiananmen massacre. Decades later, the CCP is still targeting Liu's family. FBI agents broke the news to Alysa that her family could face danger and said they would ensure her safety. The young skater told media that Chinese spies were trying to intimidate them so that her father would never organize anti-CCP protests again. She said the experience made her understand her dad's choice to speak out even more. Flora Hua, NTD News.
With the contrast between Chinese-American Winter Olympians Eileen Gu and Alysa Liu sparking discussions about money and principles, we recently spoke with Enes Kanter Freedom, former NBA star and leading activist for human rights around the world. He's made a name for himself standing up for principles over fame and gain. Here's that interview.
The Chinese government understands the power of symbolism. It uses celebrities, sports, and global events to project an image of legitimacy and strength. Recruiting internationally recognized athletes, it's not just about competition, it is about soft power. And propaganda value and shaping global perception. Financial incentives and market access are powerful tools in that strategy. So this does not diminish the athletes' hard work, but it reveals how the regime blends prestige, economics, and national messaging and advances influence. So it is a strategic playbook designed to win and admiration abroad while suppressing dissent at home.
And Enes, in many ways, the story of these two Winter Olympians mirrors your own personal story. You famously spoke up against the Chinese regime's persecution of Uyghur Muslims at great risk to your professional career. Talk to us about what that cost you professionally and why you chose to do it anyway.
Speaking out came with real consequences, especially when I wanted to speak up about all the China's human rights violations. I lost endorsement deals, business ties disappeared. I played basketball in NBA for 11 years and I was healthy. I could have competed another 5-6 years. And unfortunately, because of the relationship between NBA and China, they said enough is enough. And unfortunately, they blackballed me. And broadcast opportunities shrank and I faced threats, and everybody knows about this. I was doing a hearing in the Congress with Foreign Affairs, and I asked one simple question. I was like, how can the biggest dictatorship in the world, China, can control a 100% made American organization like the NBA and fire a U.S. citizen? And unfortunately, they did not answer. They couldn't answer. When you learn about forced labor, mass detention, organ harvesting, religious persecution, you cannot claim ignorance. Freedom is not meaningful if you only defend it when it's convenient. I chose to speak up because human dignity matters more than contracts and more than any kind of endorsement deals, because using your platform for truth is more important than protecting your comfort.
And you can watch the full interview on NTD.com. According to a new study, over 2,000 groups linked to the Chinese Communist Party are operating in the U.S., Canada, the UK, and Germany. A D.C.-based think tank, the Jamestown Foundation, released a report last week on how these groups are reshaping Western societies.
A new report from the Jamestown Foundation warns that the Chinese Communist Party is using a massive global network to influence politics into democratic countries, including the United States. The report maps more than 2,000 organizations linked to the CCP's United Front Work Department, a system designed to impose the CCP's influence and ideology without using force.
The party uses this system to shape political, social, and economic environments in ways that serve the party's goal, which is becoming the dominant global power and advancing claims such as the annexation of Taiwan.
The report says the organizations often look legitimate, such as cultural groups, business and trade associations, professional societies, schools, and Chinese language media. Researchers say much of the influence effort isn't obvious and isn't illegal activity.
Much of the United Front work happens through informal ties, such as personal relationships, invitation to China, honorary titles, and privileged access.
Though the press conference was held in Canada, the report says the same United Front influence is active in the United States and other democracies. Jamestown fellow Cheryl Yu says this isn't about ethnicity, it's about the CCP's influence operations.
This is not a question of ethnicity, it is a question of state-directed political influence inside a democracy. And protecting targeted communities is part of protecting our democratic institutions.
Jamestown President Peter Mattis says the danger is that these groups can end up speaking for communities.
When we let some of these leaders represent whole communities. We are letting the party take away the voice of our citizens. And they're using the legitimacy of our citizens to put the party's voice and Beijing's perspective into our politics, into our decision making.
Researchers say recognizing how these networks operate is key to protecting societies from foreign influence. Christina Corona, NTD News.
Coming up, the Trump administration is eliminating a key 2009 climate policy. A panel discusses how this will impact China. And the Philippines is walking a diplomatic tightrope, standing firm with the U.S. while trying to improve ties with China. We break down how the Philippines is balancing security and trade between the two. More on that after the break here on China in Focus. Welcome back to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. President Trump and EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin announced last week they're eliminating a key 2009 climate decision. That decision has been the legal foundation for regulating greenhouse gas emissions in the U.S. It's known as the endangerment finding and was put in place under the Obama administration. The policy declared that 6 gases, including carbon dioxide and methane, pose a risk to public health and contribute to climate change. Rules built on that finding include vehicle emission standards, the Clean Power Plan, and limits on methane from oil and gas operations. To discuss the repeal of this finding and its impact on China, we spoke with 2 guests. Former Trump EPA transition team member Steve Malloy. He's a senior fellow at the Energy and Environment Legal Institute. We're also joined by former Energy Department official Bart Marcois, president of Marcois Partners International Corporation. Steve, starting with you, how significant of a move is this, revoking the 2009 endangerment finding?
You cannot overstate its significance. President Trump positioned this as the greatest deregulatory measure ever. I mean, that's true. Getting rid of this thing, if it holds in courts, will create trillions and trillions of dollars of benefits for this country, save us from the national security peril we are now in with China, where we've outsourced our energy economy to communist China in large part. So this is just, it's a magnificent move. It's long past due. Now we have to defend it in court.
And Bart, your reaction to the move and the impact of this?
Steve's absolutely right. And it's important that he mentioned China, because this finding underpinned the entire climate change agenda. It underpinned the switch from calling it global warming to calling it climate change, and to going to the Green New Deal and green power generation. And it was a huge, wet, sloppy kiss to the Chinese Communist Party, because everything that stemmed from this decision, the whole climate change economy of moving toward wind power and solar power and other alternative energies and what do you call it, flow batteries and all of those things were manufactured in China. None of them were manufactured in the United States. And it went away from coal, gas, and oil that the United States has been blessed with in abundance. And because it found, the EPA administrator made a finding that these gases endangered human health, it gave the government enormous power, frightful power, to regulate every aspect of American life.
And Steve, the president of the New York-based Environmental Defense Fund said this action will only lead to more of this pollution, and that will lead to higher costs and real harms for American families. Your response to that?
Yeah, first off, greenhouse gas emissions are not pollution. They're colorless, odorless. Carbon dioxide itself is plant food, essential for feeding the 8 billion people we have on the planet. Gas prices will come down. Car prices will come down. The average age of a car on the road today is 12 years. In the 70s, it was 5 years. If people turn over their cars more often, car prices will come down. It'll just be better for the economy. And plus, there's construction equipment will be cheaper. It will work better. Truckers, they were coming after truckers. Truck costs are going to remain low. So, this rule is just going to help our economy work. Think back to the Biden climate rules and the inflation they caused and the destruction in our economy that happened then.
And Steve, I want to go to your earlier point, because China has benefited from this push for so-called renewable energy, technology especially dominating that sector. What does revoking this policy mean for the Chinese Communist Party?
Well, this is bad news for them because their plan to disable our economy and our national security was to sell us wind and solar. Not only are they essentially the exclusive manufacturers of that, they also sabotaged that along with utility scale batteries. You know, there were batteries that had to be taken out of Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, a Marine base, because they had been sabotaged by Communist China. Communist China was green energy was soft power to just cripple our national security, cripple our economy. We still have a long way to go. We're still very vulnerable to Communist China, but this is a step in the right direction.
And Bart, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, what I get, I'm sitting here fuming because as Steve was saying that, I was thinking of Joe Biden binding us ever more tightly to the Chinese yoke of slavery that they tried to put on us, and I think of the spying technology that the Chinese put into everything. We have been at war with communist China for the past 15 or 20 years. We just don't know it yet. In every possible way, they were trying to constrict us, to circumvent us, and to trammel us in a cage of their making, and we've now burst loose from it.
Well, Bart McCoy, Steve Malloy, thank you both so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
And one of our viewers asked, what's the Philippines' stance on balancing relations with the U.S. and China? It's a delicate line to walk. The country is trying to strengthen trade and diplomatic ties with Beijing. At the same time, it's standing firm with Washington as tensions rise in the South China Sea. The Philippines ambassador to Washington says he's confident the U.S. will not abandon the country, even as President Trump and Chinese leader Xi Jinping's plan to talk in April. The Philippines is the United States' oldest treaty ally in Asia, and the two countries have recently expanded military cooperation. Last year, thousands of American and Filipino troops held one of their largest joint combat drills in years. It included live-fire exercises aimed at deterring threats in the South China Sea. That's significant because the Philippines and China have clashed repeatedly in those disputed waters. The Philippines accuses China of dangerous maneuvers and water cannon attacks. Meanwhile, China claims Philippine vessels are trespassing on its territory. Even so, the Philippines says it wants to ease tensions with China, especially when it comes to trade and economic cooperation. This year, the Philippines is chairing the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. It's a regional alliance focused on economic, political, and security cooperation. As chair, officials say lowering tensions could help secure a long-delayed code of conduct for the South China Sea. That's all for today's China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. If you have any feedback on the show or have something you'd like to see us cover, send us an email at chinainfocus@ntd.com. We'd love to hear from you. For on-the-clock original news coverage, visit us at ntd.com or download our NTD app. Thanks for watching. See you tomorrow.